The church bells rang softly in the morning air, carrying a sense of excitement through the small town. It was the wedding day of Marcus, a well-known businessman and respected man in the community. He had lost his wife years ago, and after many years of raising his daughter alone, he had finally found love again, or at least that's what everyone believed. The bride-to-be, Vanessa, looked like the picture of elegance. She wore a flowing white gown, her smile glowing as guests filled the decorated church. Everyone seemed happy and ready to celebrate the union. But inside, not everyone shared the same joy. In the front row sat Aaliyah, Marcus's teenage daughter. She was dressed in a soft blue dress, her hair neatly braided, but her eyes told a different story. Instead of smiling, she kept glancing between her father and Vanessa, her heart pounding faster with every passing minute. She had seen things no one else had noticed, and though she was young, she knew something was wrong. Marcus, standing at the altar, looked proud. His suit fit him perfectly, and his smile stretched wide as he looked around at friends and family. To him, this was a second chance at happiness, a chance to fill the emptiness that had lived in his heart since the passing of his wife. He believed Vanessa was his answer. She had been charming, supportive, and always knew the right things to say. But Aaliyah couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had been haunting her for weeks. She thought back to the nights when she had overheard Vanessa whispering on the phone, her voice low and sharp. At first, Aaliyah thought it might have been work, but the words she caught didn't sound like business at all. They sounded like secrets, the kind of secrets people try hard to hide. She remembered one evening when Vanessa had left her purse on the kitchen counter. Aaliyah had seen receipts stuffed inside, expensive ones from places her father had never been with her. Jewelry, luxury dinners, even a hotel. The pieces didn't add up, and the more she noticed, the heavier her chest became. Still, she had kept quiet. She wanted to believe she was overthinking, that maybe she was just afraid of her father moving on and loving someone else. She didn't want to ruin his happiness without reason. But every time Vanessa turned her charm toward Marcus, only to change into someone colder the moment he left the room, Aaliyah knew it wasn't her imagination. The woman who hugged Marcus with a warm smile was not the same woman who rolled her eyes at Aaliyah when no one was watching. Now, sitting in the church as the ceremony began, Aaliyah's hands trembled. The priest stood tall at the altar, his deep voice filling the hall as he welcomed the guests. Soft music played, and Vanessa walked gracefully down the aisle, holding a bouquet of white roses. Everyone admired her beauty, and some even whispered that Marcus was lucky to have found her. Aaliyah, however, sat frozen, her thoughts swirling like a storm. She wanted to tell her father everything before, but each time she tried, she couldn't find the courage. She was afraid he wouldn't believe her, afraid he would think she was only jealous. After all, Vanessa had convinced everyone she was perfect. How could a teenager's words compete with a woman who seemed flawless to adults? But today, there was no turning back. The priest reached the part of the ceremony where he spoke the familiar words, "If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace." The hall went quiet. For a few moments, the silence was peaceful, and Marcus smiled, ready to continue. But in that silence, Aaliyah felt her heartbeat in her ears. Her hands clenched into fists, her legs trembling as she pushed herself to her feet. Gasps filled the air as all eyes turned to her. Her father looked shocked, his brows furrowed. "Aaliyah," he whispered, confusion clouding his face. Vanessa's smile froze, her hand tightening around her bouquet. She tried to mask her nervousness with a sweet laugh, but her eyes darted quickly toward Aaliyah, sharp and threatening. Taking a deep breath, Aaliyah spoke, her voice shaky but filled with determination. "I can't let this happen. Dad, you don't know who she really is." The crowd gasped again. Murmurs spread like wildfire across the church pews. People leaned forward, whispering to one another, while Marcus stared at his daughter in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice soft but trembling. Aaliyah swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had imagined this moment 100 times, but standing here, in front of everyone, her courage was being tested. Still, she knew this was her only chance. She couldn't stay silent and watch her father walk into a life of lies. "I heard her talking to another man," Aaliyah continued. "She said she was only marrying you for your money. She doesn't love you, Dad. She only pretends in front of you, but when you're not around, she's not the same person." The church fell into silence again. Guests looked back and forth between the bride and the young girl. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others leaned in with concern. Vanessa let out a short laugh, trying to cover her panic. "She's just nervous. She's scared of losing her father. That's all this is," she said smoothly, her eyes flicking toward the guests as if to gather sympathy. But Aaliyah's hands didn't shake anymore. She felt a wave of strength rising inside her. "I'm not lying. I even have proof." The words hit the room like thunder. Marcus's eyes widened as his daughter reached into her small purse. Her fingers brushed against her phone, the very phone where she had saved the recording she made late one night. She remembered that evening clearly, Vanessa in the living room, her voice dripping with arrogance as she spoke on the phone. Aaliyah had pressed the record button out of fear that no one would believe her otherwise. Holding the phone tightly, she stood tall, her eyes meeting her father's. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, but she knew she was doing the right thing. She knew this was the only way to save her father from a lifetime of heartbreak and betrayal. The priest stood frozen, unsure of what to say, while the guests waited with bated breath. Marcus, torn between shock and fear, whispered again, "Aaliyah, what proof?" The young girl's heart pounded, but she raised the phone, her voice steady. "I recorded her. I can play it right now. Everyone will hear the truth." At that moment, the atmosphere inside the church changed completely. The excitement of the wedding turned into tension so thick that even the soft sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows seemed to dim. Marcus's face shifted from confusion to dread, while Vanessa's mask of charm began to crack. And in that charged silence, everyone knew this wedding was about to take a turn no one expected. The silence inside the church was so heavy that people could almost hear each other breathing. Aaliyah stood there, clutching her phone tightly in her hand, her small frame trembling but her eyes steady. Marcus's heart raced in his chest as he looked at his daughter, then at Vanessa. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, wondering if the young girl was telling the truth or if it was just a dramatic outburst from a scared teenager. The priest shifted uncomfortably at the altar, unsure whether to step in or remain silent. Vanessa was the first to break the moment. She forced a laugh, though her voice cracked slightly, betraying her unease. "She's only a child," she said smoothly, looking at the guests instead of Marcus. "She doesn't understand what she's saying. She's afraid of losing her father to another woman, that's all this is." Her tone was calm on the surface, but her hand gripped the bouquet so tightly that the stems bent under the pressure. Marcus's eyes darted back to his daughter. "Aaliyah," he said softly, "you said you had proof." "Yes, Dad," Aaliyah whispered, then raised her voice with more strength. "I heard her with my own ears. She said she only wanted your money. She was planning something with another man. I recorded it so no one would say I was lying." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some guests covered their mouths in shock, others shook their heads in disbelief. Vanessa's smile began to fade, and her eyes narrowed at Aaliyah, a flicker of panic crossing her face before she quickly composed herself. "Play it then," Vanessa said suddenly, her voice sharp and defiant. She crossed her arms, as though daring the girl to prove her accusation. She was trying to appear confident, but the faint quiver in her voice told another story. Aaliyah unlocked her phone with shaky fingers. She scrolled quickly until she found the recording. With one deep breath, she pressed play. The church filled with a voice everyone recognized Vanessa's. It was unmistakable. The recording crackled a bit, but her words were clear. "Don't worry, once I marry Marcus, I'll have access to his accounts. He's so blinded by love, he won't even see it coming. We'll have everything we need. Just be patient." The sound echoed through the large hall. Every person in the room froze. Marcus's eyes widened, his face draining of color. The weight of betrayal hit him like a wave. He looked at Vanessa, stunned, his chest tightening as if the very air had been stolen from his lungs. The guests erupted into whispers. Some shook their heads in disgust, others looked directly at Marcus with sympathy. The perfect bride, the woman everyone admired, was now exposed in the worst way possible. Vanessa's face turned pale, but she quickly tried to recover. "That's fake," she shouted, her voice rising. "She edited that. Do you really think a child can't manipulate audio these days? She's just jealous." But Marcus didn't respond right away. His eyes were fixed on Vanessa, searching her face for the truth. He thought back to the months they had spent together, the dinners, the late-night talks, the promises she made. Were they all lies? His heart broke as he realized how blind he had been. "Vanessa," Marcus finally said, his voice heavy with disbelief, "is that your voice?" She hesitated for the slightest moment, long enough for everyone to see her fear. Then she forced another smile. "Of course not. She made it up. She's just scared of losing you." Aaliyah's voice cut through her denial. "That's not the only thing, Dad. I also found papers. Receipts for things she never told you about, expensive things she bought with someone else. She hides them in her purse. I saw them." The guests leaned closer, their curiosity burning. The wedding had turned into something no one had ever imagined. It wasn't just an objection, it was an unveiling. Marcus's jaw tightened. He remembered how Vanessa always carried her purse, never letting him touch it. He recalled moments when she disappeared for hours, giving vague excuses. The puzzle pieces were falling into place, each one cutting deeper than the last. Vanessa, realizing the crowd was turning against her, dropped her bouquet and stepped forward. Her face hardened, her sweet mask gone. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "Marcus, are you really going to believe a child over me? After everything we've shared?" Her voice was filled with anger now, no longer soft and charming. She looked around the room, but the faces staring back at her were cold. The whispers had turned into judgment, and no one seemed to believe her anymore. Marcus took a step closer to his daughter, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. He could feel her shaking, but her eyes stayed locked on Vanessa, unafraid. "Why would my daughter lie?" he asked firmly. "She's never done this before. She's never tried to hurt me." Vanessa's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time, her confidence cracked completely. The woman who once seemed untouchable now looked cornered. Aaliyah's voice grew stronger as she added, "Dad, she's not even using her real name. I found her past online. She's been arrested before. She changed her name so no one would know. Please believe me." The revelation hit like lightning. Gasps filled the room once more, and the murmurs grew louder. People began pulling out their phones, whispering about looking up Vanessa's past for themselves. Vanessa's face twisted with fury. "You little brat," she hissed under her breath, her eyes burning into Aaliyah. She hadn't meant for anyone else to hear it, but her anger carried farther than she realized. A few guests in the front row caught it, their eyes widening. Marcus's decision was made in that instant. His chest burned with anger, his heart heavy with betrayal. He looked at Vanessa one final time, shaking his head slowly. "I trusted you," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought you loved me. But everything you did was for money. You fooled me, but you won't fool anyone else." The hall fell silent once again. Everyone's eyes were on Vanessa, who now stood exposed and powerless. Her hands shook as she looked around, realizing there was no escape from the truth. Aaliyah, though trembling, felt relief wash over her. She had spoken up, she had told the truth, and now her father finally saw what she had seen all along. The wedding had stopped, but the story was far from over. Vanessa's mask had cracked, and soon the full weight of her lies would come crashing down on her. And deep inside, Marcus knew one thing for sure: his daughter had just saved him from a mistake that could have cost him everything. The church was no longer filled with excitement and joy. The air had turned heavy, almost suffocating. The once celebratory atmosphere of Marcus's wedding now felt like a courtroom where Vanessa stood accused, and Aaliyah, the young girl everyone had underestimated, was the key witness. Every pair of eyes stared at Vanessa, waiting for her next move, waiting for the truth to come out in full. Marcus stood tall beside his daughter, his hand still resting on her shoulder. His expression had changed from confusion to anger and then to a deep, pained seriousness. He couldn't believe what he had just heard, but deep down, his instincts told him Aaliyah was right. The mask Vanessa had worn so perfectly was beginning to slip, and now everyone in the room could see it. Vanessa tried to smile again, but this time it looked forced, her lips trembling as though even her body refused to obey her anymore. "Marcus," she said sweetly, though her voice cracked under the weight of the moment, "are you really going to throw away our love over some childish prank? This is our wedding day. She's just scared. Don't let her ruin this." But Marcus didn't answer. His silence was louder than any words could have been. He studied Vanessa's face carefully, seeing a woman he thought he knew but realizing he didn't know her at all. Every memory with her replayed in his head: her sudden disappearances, her expensive shopping habits, her constant avoidance whenever he asked too many questions. He wanted so badly to believe in love again, but now he saw that his desire had blinded him. The guests whispered among themselves. Some shook their heads in pity for Marcus, while others glared at Vanessa as if they had personally been betrayed. A few of Marcus's closest friends exchanged knowing looks. They had doubted Vanessa from the beginning but had chosen to stay silent out of respect. Now, with Aaliyah's brave words and proof, their suspicions were confirmed. Aaliyah, though trembling, held her ground. Her voice shook but her determination did not falter. "Dad, she's dangerous," she said softly, looking up at him. "I didn't want to embarrass you, but I couldn't let this happen. She doesn't love you. She was just pretending so she could take everything you worked for." Those words hit Marcus harder than anything else. He thought about his years of hard work, the business he built from nothing, the sacrifices he made for Aaliyah's future. To think someone would try to take advantage of all that, to use his love as a weapon against him, it made his blood boil. Finally, Marcus turned back to Vanessa, his jaw tight, his voice low but sharp. "Tell me the truth, Vanessa. Who are you really?" Vanessa's eyes flickered nervously. For the first time, she didn't look like the composed, graceful woman everyone admired. She looked cornered, like a person trapped with no way out. Still, she tried to fight back. "I'm the woman who loves you," she said quickly. "I'm the woman who wants to build a life with you. Don't let her lies destroy us." But Aaliyah stepped forward again, her courage growing. "She's lying, Dad. I found her name online. She changed it because she has a past she doesn't want anyone to know about." That revelation caused another wave of gasps through the church. Phones were pulled out, fingers swiping quickly across screens as people tried to confirm Aaliyah's claim. Murmurs spread like wildfire, and in just a few moments, someone in the back whispered loudly, "It's true. She has a record." Vanessa's face drained of all color. Her secret had been cracked open, and there was no way to hide it now. The charm, the sweet voice, the polished image, everything was falling apart in front of hundreds of witnesses. "Marcus, don't listen to them," she shouted desperately, her voice echoing against the church walls. They don't know the real me. They're just jealous of us. But Marcus had heard enough. His eyes were filled with pain and betrayal as he stepped closer to her. You lied to me, he said in a low, steady voice. You looked me in the eyes and pretended to love me while planning to destroy me. I can't believe I almost gave you my name, my trust, my life. Vanessa's breathing quickened. She looked around the church, realizing that not a single face looked at her with kindness anymore. The people who once admired her now looked at her as if she were a stranger. Suddenly, her composure shattered. She dropped the bouquet to the floor, the roses scattering across the aisle. Fine, she screamed, her voice raw and angry. Yes, I wanted your money. Yes, I planned everything. But do you blame me? You had everything: wealth, respect, a perfect life, and I had nothing. Do you know what it's like to struggle every single day? To watch other people live in luxury while you scrape by with nothing. Her confession silenced the church. For a brief moment, there was no whispering, no murmuring, just shock. Marcus stood frozen, unable to believe that the woman he was about to marry had admitted everything so openly. Aaliyah's eyes widened. She felt both terrified and relieved at the same time. Terrified at Vanessa's anger, but relieved that the truth was finally out in the open. She had been right all along. Vanessa's voice grew louder, fueled by her frustration. I was tired of being nobody. I wanted a better life, and you were my way out. I deserved it. After everything I've been through, I deserved to finally have something. Her words echoed through the hall, but instead of sympathy, they only deepened the disgust of the guests. People shook their heads in disbelief, mothers pulled their children closer, and fathers whispered angrily about her lack of shame. Marcus's anger boiled over. His voice thundered in the hall. You think you deserve to steal from me? To use me? To use my daughter's trust as a game? That's not love, Vanessa. That's betrayal. Vanessa's eyes darted toward the door. Her breathing quickened as though she was calculating an escape. But Marcus's closest friends, who had been standing near the aisle, stepped forward to block her path. Aaliyah clung to her father's arm, her heart racing. She could feel his body trembling with anger, but she also felt the strength in him, the strength of a man who realized he had been fooled but was not willing to let it continue any longer. The priest, who had been silent throughout most of the ordeal, finally spoke, his voice heavy with sorrow. This ceremony cannot continue. What has been revealed here is too serious to ignore. For the sake of everyone present, and for the sake of truth, this wedding is over. Those words sealed it. The wedding was no longer a celebration but a confrontation that had laid bare a shocking truth. Vanessa stood frozen, her eyes darting around the room, her body tense as though she was ready to run. The whispers of the crowd turned into a roar of judgment, people calling her names, shaking their heads, and pulling out their phones to capture the moment. Marcus took a deep breath, then pulled out his phone. His voice was steady but filled with rage. I can't let this go. This isn't just betrayal. This is a crime. I have to protect my daughter and myself. The crowd fell silent once again as Marcus began dialing. Everyone knew what was happening. Aaliyah's warning had not only stopped the wedding, it had exposed a danger that could no longer be ignored. And in that moment, as the phone rang in Marcus's hand, Aaliyah held her breath, knowing their lives were about to change forever. The entire church was frozen in disbelief as Marcus held his phone tightly in his hand, his face pale but filled with determination. Aaliyah stood close to him, clutching his arm, her heart pounding in her chest. The wedding had transformed into a scene no one could have imagined. A moment ago, it was supposed to be the happiest day of Marcus's life, but now it had become a nightmare. Vanessa's confession still lingered in the air like poison. She had admitted in front of everyone that she wanted Marcus for his money, that she saw him as a way out of her struggles, and that she had planned everything. There was no way to twist her words anymore, no way to hide behind fake smiles and soft voices. Her mask was gone. Marcus's voice broke the silence as he spoke into his phone. "This is Marcus Carter. I need the police at St. James Church immediately. It's urgent." His words echoed in the hall, sending ripples of shock through the guests. Gasps filled the room as they realized he wasn't going to let Vanessa walk away. He wasn't going to let her escape. His trust had been broken, but he would not allow his life, or his daughter's safety, to be destroyed. Vanessa's eyes widened in panic. She took a step forward, her hands trembling. "Marcus, no. You can't do this to me," she cried, her voice sharp and desperate. "You don't understand, I had no choice." Marcus turned to face her, his expression cold. "No choice? You had every choice, Vanessa. You could have been honest. You could have built something real with me. Instead, you chose lies. You chose greed." His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the pain he felt inside. The priest lowered his head, whispering a prayer under his breath. Guests murmured among themselves, some shaking their heads in anger, others staring at Vanessa with disgust. Children clung to their parents, confused by the drama unfolding before them. Vanessa dropped to her knees suddenly, tears spilling down her cheeks. She reached out toward Marcus, her voice breaking. "Please. Please, Marcus, I love you. Don't do this. I was wrong, I was stupid, but I love you." Aaliyah stepped in front of her father, her young voice cutting through the chaos. "If you really loved him, you wouldn't have lied to him. You wouldn't have tried to take everything from him. Love isn't about money. It's about honesty." Her words struck the room like lightning. Guests nodded in agreement, some even clapping softly in support of Aaliyah's courage. Vanessa's tears flowed faster, but instead of softening hearts, her cries felt hollow, like the final act of a performance no one believed anymore. Marcus ended the call with the police and put his phone back in his pocket. He stood tall, his arm protectively around his daughter. "The truth is out now," he said firmly. "There's nothing more to hide." The sound of sirens in the distance grew louder, each second pulling the moment closer to its climax. Vanessa's head whipped toward the doors, her breathing quickening. She knew what was coming, and the fear in her eyes made her look smaller, weaker than she had ever appeared before. "Marcus, please," she screamed, her voice echoing off the walls. "If the police take me, my life is over. You can't do this. Don't let your daughter ruin us." Marcus's anger flared, his voice booming. "Don't blame my daughter. She saved me. She saved us from disaster. If it weren't for her, I would have signed my life away to a lie. I will never forgive you for trying to manipulate me and hurt her." The doors of the church burst open, and uniformed officers entered quickly. Their boots echoed across the floor as they made their way down the aisle. Guests moved aside, whispering nervously, some even pulling out their phones to record what was happening. Vanessa's face turned pale as she stumbled backward. "No, no, please," she whispered, shaking her head as if denying reality. "This isn't happening." The officers approached her, their voices calm but firm. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us. We have some questions you need to answer." She shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "No. You don't understand. I'm the victim here. He promised me everything, and then he turned against me." But the officers didn't buy her words. They had heard similar stories before, and the evidence against her was already strong. Vanessa tried to pull away, but the officers took her by the arms, guiding her firmly toward the doors. As she was led out, Vanessa twisted her neck to look at Marcus one last time. Her voice was filled with bitterness. "You'll regret this. You'll regret choosing her over me." But Marcus didn't flinch. He held Aaliyah tighter, his voice steady. "The only regret I have is ever letting you into our lives." The doors closed behind Vanessa and the officers, and silence fell over the church once again. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone, but the danger had finally been removed. Marcus turned to the guests, his face weary. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice heavy with emotion. "I invited you here for a wedding, and instead, you witnessed a nightmare. I can't change what happened, but I thank God for the truth being revealed before it was too late." The guests stood and clapped softly, not out of celebration, but out of support. They admired Marcus's strength and, even more, Aaliyah's courage. The little girl who stood up in front of everyone had saved her father from disaster. Marcus looked down at his daughter, his eyes filling with tears. "You were so brave," he whispered. "You saved me. I will never forget this day, not because of the pain, but because of you." Aaliyah leaned into his embrace, tears in her own eyes. "I just wanted to protect you, Dad. I couldn't let her hurt you." He kissed the top of her head, holding her tightly. "And you did. You protected me more than anyone else ever could." The priest, who had been standing silently, finally spoke again. His voice was gentle but firm. "This was not the day we expected, but perhaps it was the day that was needed. The truth, no matter how painful, always comes to light. And today, it came through the courage of a child." The words brought nods and murmurs of agreement from the crowd. People began to slowly make their way out of the church, speaking softly about what they had just witnessed. Some came up to Marcus to offer words of comfort, while others hugged Aaliyah, telling her how proud they were of her. The decorations, the flowers, the carefully prepared food, all of it now seemed meaningless. What mattered most was the bond between father and daughter, stronger now than ever before. Outside, the flashing lights of the police cars painted the streets in red and blue. The guests avoided looking at Vanessa, who sat in the back of a squad car, her face pressed against the glass, her expression a mixture of anger and despair. For her, the day had ended in shame. But for Marcus and Aaliyah, it ended with truth. They walked out of the church together, hand in hand, the cool air brushing against their faces. The wedding was over, but their story was far from finished. Together, they would rebuild their lives, stronger than before, and with a bond that could never be broken. The flashing lights from the police cars slowly faded into the distance as the vehicles drove away with Vanessa in custody. The once decorated church, filled with flowers and bright ribbons, now seemed empty and heavy with the weight of what had happened. Guests were still in small groups outside, whispering about the shocking events they had just witnessed. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others kept saying how brave Aaliyah had been. What was supposed to be a day of celebration had turned into a day of truth. Marcus stood at the steps of the church, his arm around Aaliyah. His face looked tired, and the sparkle that had been in his eyes earlier that morning was gone. Instead, there was a calm heaviness, mixed with gratitude. He looked down at his daughter, who leaned quietly against him, her small hand gripping his tightly. She had just gone through something no child should ever have to do: stand up in front of hundreds of people and reveal a truth that would change their lives forever. The guests began to leave one by one. Some walked up to Marcus, offering him comforting words. "You did the right thing," one elderly woman told him softly. "Your daughter saved you." Another guest, a close friend of Marcus, placed a hand on his shoulder. "This was painful, but imagine what could have happened if you had gone through with the marriage." "You're lucky," Aaliyah spoke up. Marcus nodded each time, grateful for their kindness. But deep down, he was still trying to process everything. How could he have been so blind? How had he not seen the truth about Vanessa until his daughter revealed it? The thought weighed heavily on him. After most of the guests had left, Marcus and Aaliyah remained inside the church for a while. The colorful decorations and flowers that once seemed so joyful now felt meaningless. Marcus sat on one of the benches, holding his daughter close. "I don't know what I would have done without you today," he said softly. "You were stronger than me. You saw what I couldn't see." Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears. "I was so scared, Dad. I thought you wouldn't believe me. I thought everyone would think I was just trying to stop you from being happy." Marcus's eyes glistened with emotion as he pulled her closer. "Aaliyah, never think that again. You were right to speak up. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. I will always believe you. Always." Those words gave Aaliyah a sense of relief she hadn't felt in weeks. For so long, she had carried the secret inside her, worried that no one would listen. Now, she knew her father trusted her, and that trust meant more than anything. The following days were not easy. News of the incident spread quickly through the town. People whispered about it in coffee shops, at the grocery store, and even at school. Some shook their heads in shock that such a thing could happen in their community. Others praised Aaliyah for her bravery. Though it was difficult to deal with the attention, Marcus reminded his daughter that the truth was more important than what people said. At home, Marcus and Aaliyah found themselves growing closer. Without Vanessa around, the house felt peaceful again. There were no more secret phone calls late at night, no more tense silences when Marcus left the room. Instead, father and daughter spent more time together cooking, watching movies, and simply talking. One evening, as they sat at the dining table eating dinner, Marcus put down his fork and looked at Aaliyah seriously. "I want you to know something. I was so focused on wanting to be happy again that I ignored the little signs. I let myself believe what I wanted to believe. But you saw the truth. And you reminded me that happiness can't be built on lies." Aaliyah smiled softly, her eyes shining. "I just didn't want you to get hurt. Mom always said we have to look out for each other." Those words made Marcus's throat tighten. He thought of his late wife and how proud she would have been of their daughter. He nodded slowly, his heart full. "She was right. And today, you proved that you are braver than I ever imagined." In the weeks that followed, Marcus had to meet with lawyers and the police to sort out the situation with Vanessa. They discovered that she had indeed been planning a financial scheme with another man. She had a history of deceit, and Marcus had been her next target. It was painful to learn the full truth, but it also gave him closure. He knew now that Aaliyah's actions had not just saved his heart, they had saved his future. One Sunday morning, Marcus and Aaliyah walked together in the park. The sun shone warmly, children played nearby, and the sound of laughter filled the air. Marcus stopped near a bench, sitting down while Aaliyah skipped a few steps ahead, her dress flowing in the breeze. He watched her, his heart swelling with pride. He called her back, and when she sat beside him, he placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You know, Aaliyah, people say weddings are about love. But I think this whole experience taught me something bigger. Love isn't just about finding someone new. It's also about protecting the people who are already in your life. You protected me. And I promise to always protect you." Aaliyah leaned her head against his arm. "We'll protect each other, Dad." Those words stayed with Marcus. He realized he didn't need a wedding or a new partner to feel whole. He already had the most important person in his life, his daughter. Together, they could face anything. Months later, when life had settled back to normal, Marcus decided to host a small dinner for close friends and family. It wasn't a wedding, but it was a celebration of something even more meaningful, the bond between father and daughter. As everyone gathered around the table, Marcus raised a glass. "I want to thank all of you for being here," he began. "What happened months ago was painful, but it reminded me of something important. Happiness doesn't come from wealth or fancy weddings. It comes from truth, trust, and the people who stand by you when everything else falls apart. And for me, that person is my daughter." The room filled with applause and smiles. Aaliyah blushed, but she also smiled proudly. She had become the hero of her own family, and she knew it. That night, as Marcus tucked Aaliyah into bed, she looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Dad, do you think you'll ever get married again?" Marcus chuckled softly, brushing her hair back. "Maybe one day. But if I ever do, I promise I'll listen to your feelings first. Because you see things I don't, and I'll never ignore that again." Aaliyah grinned. "Okay. But for now, it's just us, right?" Marcus kissed her forehead gently. "For now, and always. We're a team." As he turned off the light and closed the door, Marcus felt a deep peace settle in his heart. The wedding had ended in disaster, but what came after was something far greater: a renewed bond with his daughter, built on trust, honesty, and love. And as he lay in his bed that night, Marcus whispered to himself, "She saved me. My daughter saved me." For Marcus and Aaliyah, the day that began as a wedding ended as a lesson. It was not the lesson they expected, but it was one they would carry forever. The truth always comes to light, and love built on honesty is stronger than anything else.